Hello, hello.
Hey man, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Oh, there you go.
What's up, man?
What's happening?
Nothing much, man. Is there a doctor in the house?
Right there, Doctor Brother William Clark.
What's up, man?
Man. Uh, living, living.
Yeah.
All is well. All is well.
You ready?
Oh yeah.
Hey, everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations. This is the show where we talk about leadership according to the world that matters to you. And I wanted to quickly come on and introduce a friend of mine who is joined the podcast today. And we thought we would talk about his book that's been out for some time, but also utilize this time to talk about education at large for minorities and men of color. And I'm talking about my good friend, Dr. Omar Simpson. Omar, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. Excited, happy to be here. Thankful to have this opportunity to converse with you and share with you somebody who I've looked up to for quite some time. So I'm thankful for the opportunity, man. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, man. We've been I don't know how long we've been friends, man. But it's been a minute. It's been a super minute.
2006, 2007.
Jeez. That's
Yeah.
that's a minute.
Yeah.
That's a minute.
Inroads, man. Inroads.
I remember. Yo, for those of you who are watching and y'all don't know what inroads is and you're a person of color, I strongly suggest that you take the time to get to know who and what inroads is, because it certainly was a blessing in my life when I was coming up in my undergrad years, and certainly for you too, Omar. And it just makes a difference when people of color have an opportunity to be exposed to other professionals, both of the majority and minority, and get to figure out how to be a professional at a young age, so that when you're graduating and you're looking for full-time employment, you already know what to do, how to do, and you can take it from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love Inroads. That was my first internship experience.
Yeah.
First opportunity to develop as a professional in a world that I knew nothing of growing up where I grew up. And then got to meet great people like yourself through the experience. So I love Inroads. I always talk about Inroads and encourage young people to engage and connect with Inroads.
Definitely. So let's jump into the conversation, man. Before we go into the conversation, just tell folks a little bit about yourself and where you come from, what you're doing now, and what's on the horizon for you.
Indeed, man. Thank you for the opportunity to share just a little bit about myself and my journey. So, essentially, Omar Simpson, originally from Camden, New Jersey, good old Jersey love. I am somebody who, at an early age, had a yearning for learning, I say, and a passion for education. I also identify as a first generation college student. So I know for me, going to college, it was something that I looked at as an opportunity for economic growth. And I thought, hey, I'm gonna be a businessman, and that will be my path. And that came out of growing up in poverty and growing up in a single parent household. I always looked to earn money and earn income to help my family and kind of buy my little candy and toys and things. But I only knew of three things that I could go to college for: either to be a businessman, to be a doctor, or to be a lawyer. And I'm like, I really don't like science, so the doctor thing is out. Lawyer, I ain't really got time to be debating with folks, so that's out. I like selling candy. I can do this entrepreneurship thing. I'm gonna do business, man. And that kind of set my path until, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but some experiences that I had in my undergraduate college that kind of shifted my path just a bit. But I always had just a yearning for learning, man, and a passion for education. And the one thing I'll say that about my experience, I used to read encyclopedias as a kid. Not because I wanted to, but because that's what I had available. I was so thankful that my mom had encyclopedias in the house. And for those who don't know, it was Google before Google. Before we had, we could just search everything on Google. We had this large set of encyclopedias, A through Z. and all kinds of facts and different things in them, man. And I would read those in the summertime and during my free time. And that just set my path, man, and helped me kind of uproot myself out of poverty. And, you know, my education, I went to, you know, college, a small liberal arts school in New Jersey. Went to Rutgers, then went to UNC for my PhD. And went. Now I'm back here in an administrative role and in a teaching capacity, and just love it. I'm being able to do what I want to do, what I love to do, which is help people, help young people.
All right. So yeah, I relate to that a lot, man. And dang, you brought me back. I forgot about like encyclopedias, man.
Man, the good old days, man. The good old days.
Man, so yeah, I remember my mom had a whole set. I think she had two sets, and that was a part of life, man. That was Google before Google, like you said, man. That was, man. Like just that whole comments brought me back, man. Wow. Yes, I remember those days. I remember the days of magazines. Yeah. They were plentiful as well.
Yeah. Man, I know I used to be excited. It used to be a magazine, East Bay, man.
Yeah.
And it was like a group of us, you know, back home in the neighborhood. And it was always just one person that was able to get that magazine. And we would all huddle around looking at whatever the newest sneaks that was out, the newest clothes that was in this East Bay magazine, man. Oh, man.
I remember.
I
remember, man, we used to share that magazine in between class or in between periods. We were switching class. Yo, let me get that magazine. And it was as if like we really thought we were going to grab them. So, I mean, it was only like a select few of kids who had the capacity to go get them. But yeah, man, not everybody had the capacity to do that.
Never brought a thing out of there, man. But it was so cool to be in the in crowd. Oh, man, that's what's coming out. Oh, okay.
Yeah, man. Oh man, sorry guys, we were reminiscent of what it meant. Y'all young kids don't know nothing about that.
Nothing about East Bay encyclopedias, man. And here's the funny part, Will. Neither of us are really that old.
No, no.
Yeah, like, that's the funny part, man. It's really like yesterday. Like,
yeah,
you know, it's changed that fast.
God, it feels like, you know, you ever talk to your grandpa and he would say, you know, back in 19 something. Now I hear myself saying, man, back in 2007. Back in 2009. Like these are mile markers in my life now, man.
Oh,
I can't believe how time flies.
Really, man. That is the truth.
Man, so let's jump into this conversation. I love to ask this question of everyone that joins the show, and I'll ask this of you. What's your definition of leadership?
Man, great question. I have a lot. There's a lot of definitions of leaderships. I think essentially I think of just different people's stories and kind of how they exude leadership. If I had to pull out some points from people that I've watched, you know, people like yourself, people like a mentor of mine, Mr. Hezekiah Griggs III, people like my mom, you know, even looking back at history, you know, folk I follow like Dr. MLK. There's a few like very distinct things that I've noticed in them that I've like emulated myself. So I break down into three different areas. One, character and values. Like the people that I've seen to be the most successful and greatest leaders, they're disciplined to their values and their principles. They don't waver. They don't change. They're not like waves of the sea. Whatever their principles are and whatever they value, that is it. And that's one thing that I've taken into myself, my particular values and the principles that I, you know, guide myself by. I don't waver on those things. I listen in, I'm compassionate, but whatever my principles are, whatever is at my core, that's at my core. And that's how I kind of manage through leadership in different situations, because I know no matter what, these values are going to remain consistent. The other thing is kind of that strong sense of self, which I've known, like, it's so easy, especially in today's world, and not to go on this old new thing, but, you know, with such access to other people and this idea of, you know, social media, like this world of comparison is running rampant. And for me, working in colleges and institutions, and I hear young people just comparing themselves every single day and trying to compete with the next person. And I think systematically, to a certain extent, we're set up that way because it's like, okay, there's one opportunity and there's 100 people going for it. So you got to compare and contrast all of that. But I think as leaders, we have to be strong in who we are. Something that somebody shared with me yesterday, they said some people don't know 3/4 of their own self, because 3/4 of themselves is being modeled after somebody else. They said, guys said, well, Omar, what made you get that haircut? And I said, because I liked it. This what looks good on me. My hairline is going back a little bit, man. And, I got to do the ball fade thing. That's me. If I ask somebody else, they may say, well, so-and-so has this haircut, so I want it. I was like, well, is that truly you? And of course, that's in the lowest sense of thinking about it, but essentially, like, being yourself, being who you are. And even in my book, like my most acclaimed chapter is the chapter on loving thyself. I give 7 strategies for people to literally love themselves, which I've learned is not the easiest thing to do for most people. So knowing who you are, and the last thing that I've seen every leader who has been successful as a leader, including yourself, is service. There's no success without service. There's no leadership without service, in my humble opinion, of course. Service is just the guide for everything. I think within business, within anything you can think of, there has to be a root of service there. This idea of wanting to make a positive change, just like we're doing this on Zoom. We're utilizing computers. Someone at some point said, I want to make people's lives easier. I want to make a way for people to connect. I want to make a way for people to be able to see each other and, have conversations, meaningful dialogue. So I'm going to create this, right? That was a service that someone created. Me, I found my purpose through service. I knew I had a yearning for learning, and I loved education, but it wasn't until I provided an opportunity for young kids to get on a college campus and actually go through a 5-week program, a leadership development program, ironically, that I felt, okay, man, this is what I need to do, is through service. So not to be long-winded, but the 3 areas that I've seen from people like yourself and the other great leaders is one, being principle-centered and value-driven, knowing who you are and having a strong sense of self, and being truly rooted in service.
So that's good. I typically share the definition of leadership with folks that jump on a call as the ability to influence. Right. It's the ability to influence a group of people or oneself. And I'm probably going to divert from our questions and talk about this chapter, Love Thyself, in a moment. But for me, what you shared in terms of character, being principle centered, having a strong sense of self and service, I think leads to the concept of what it means to influence others and yourself. Ideally, it becomes extremely challenging to lead other people, direct behavior, direct outcomes for teams, for organizations, for departments, if you're lacking a value system that does not allow you to stand for what's right, to stand for what's consistent, to stand for what's principled, to stand for what makes a difference. At the end of the day, it's that consistency of your principles and your character that defines you as a leader. I've noticed, Omar, that leaders are always going to be challenged and pushed to the brink by their own team members, right? And what they're doing is no different from what a kid does, which is if mom and dad says A, B, and C, the kid who isn't necessarily as principled as the adult in the room is going to continue to push and push and push to see if mom and dad budgets. And it's the parent's job to stay consistent in an organization such as yours, mine, elsewhere. And for those watching and listening, you're constantly going to be pushed, and people, whether they're adults or not, are going to try to push you. And it's up to you as a leader to be as principled and centered as possible and to be consistent in that. And then you talked about having a strong sense of self. Man, I was thinking this probably the past 6 months about the comparison game, that people feel so inadequate because of what other people are posting. I, for a long time, was that guy that said, I'm not posting anything because I don't want people to feel like this is an old school term, guys, flossing or, That's before bling. I mean, bling is an old term too. But I didn't want to present myself as something that I'm not. Right. I got to the point where I said, you know what, I'm going to post what's happening in my life. And this is my perspective of my life, the pictures, the images, the flyers, whatever's going on, right? It is what it is. And so it comes down to, as you said, man, not even thinking about what other people are doing, what they're saying, how they're functioning. It's about me. And it doesn't mean you don't care about other people, but it's saying that my principles, my value system, my worldview is just as important as the popular person on social media with 1,000 friends or more.
Yes.
And then you talked about service. I think that goes without saying. So quickly tell us what's inspired you to write the book For the Love of Education. For those of you watching on the screen, this is the book. I got my signed copy here. But what inspired you to write this this book, For the Love of Education, the Power of an Awakened Mind? And then we'll jump into that chapter about loving thyself.
Man, absolutely, man. And great. Oh, man. Everything you said, I co-sign and agree with tremendously. But yeah, For the Love of Education, the Power of an Awakened Mind. I'll say two things. One, once I finished my PhD program and got to a particular place from an academic and educational standpoint, I look back on my experiences and kind of truly understood how transformative education could be. And I always make the distinction between education and schooling. Schooling is, this formal process of, going to an institution and sitting in a classroom and getting a grade. I wasn't really talking about that. And in the book, and I talk about that as well as kind of that distinction. I'm not talking about loving school. I'm talking about loving education. My mantra is learning is a lifestyle, like making it a part of your everyday existence is always learning. Like I'm learning right now as you're talking, well, I'm taking notes because I'm learning. That's just my way of being and my way of knowing, my way of understanding the world around me. So this book, I was like, man, I have this message. I really want people to understand how to love learning. I see how transformative just education can be. And now, we have access to so much information. I can go on YouTube and learn how to fix my brakes on my car. Not that I would do it because I'm not crazy. I know my strengths, but I could because I have access to that knowledge and that education. There's free online courses all over the place. Harvard has courses online that you can do. So to kind of, just have that message being pushed out, encouraging young people to love learning and live a lifestyle of constant learning, to encourage teachers to help teachers kind of facilitate a love of learning and bring love to the core and to the center of the educational experience. That was something that I wanted to do. And I know, I've learned as I try to be several different people, man, as far as being in several places at once, I'm only one person. So I can yell from the mountaintops about education and learning, but I can't reach every single body. But something outside of me, a book, I can put it all in a book and I can ship it out. I can send it out. When I'm not there, somebody could be reading the book, so on and so forth. And I've learned, some of the greatest mentors I've never met. Some of the greatest mentors are in the books. I'm reading about their journey in their life, and I'm picking up and learning things through the books because I just don't have access to meet them. And same thing. And the second part for me, and very, short is, I wanted something that was going to outlast me. I wanted something that was going to live longer than me. I wanted something that somebody, I don't know when my time will come, but however many years from now, somebody will be able to pick up a book and say, "Oh, shoot, For the Love of Education, the Power of Awakened Mind. Let me check this out." And hopefully, something in the book will spark something for someone. And I'm a big believer on planting seeds. So we plant seeds. So if this book can be a seed for somebody that I'm not there or beyond my existence, then, that's a part of me serving out and living out my purpose.
Facts. So I'm going to go off script. I'm not going to ask the other two questions. We're just going to wing this. So I'm going to go to the last point you mentioned about having your content outlive you. This particular book was written by Dr. Jared Boshi. And I discovered this book during my doctoral program towards the end as I was wrapping up my research. And it's called Migrating from Innovation to Entrepreneurship, and it's relevant for nonprofit leaders who are looking to sustain the business of the nonprofit or the church, if you will. And that's what my research is on. And he's still around as of this recording. And his book, his other content that I was able to get a hold of, which is no longer in print, which trips me out. But that book, I tell everybody that will listen to get this book if you're a nonprofit leader, because it's the mindset that he talks about. And then his older material from the 80s and early 90s, even though the examples are dated, they're still relevant today, right? And so I'm with you when it comes to writing something that will outlast you beyond your years. And so for those of you who are in the nonprofit space, I encourage you to get this book. But as you saw me grab, I'm take a minute, right? This book was my first book, right?
Let's talk about that.
Yo, so this book is my first book called Leverage, and I think it's the perfect complement to your book about the love of education, because it's literally saying, when I was trying to figure life out and I had absolutely nothing to stand on in college, I didn't have a dad that was passing down a business, a mom that was passing down wealth. They were great parents, don't get me wrong, but in comparison, there it goes again, to my peers who were driving Mercedes, BMWs, newer cars. When I was in an undergrad program, I had nothing. And this book was born out of that, Leverage. But the first book that I got my hands on is my most recent book, which is Leverage. And the reason not Leverage, Sustainable. The reason I grabbed this, Omar, you were talking about the love of education. And there was something in the book that I wrote that I just thought was essential to the growth of a leader. And it's in my self-leadership chapter, which is chapter 5. And I talk about 3 biblical principles of learning. And this kind of dovetails into the 7 proven strategies of loving thyself, because you start to talk about this too. But in my chapter 5, I talk about 3 biblical terms for learning. The first is lahag, okay, which is the Old Testament understanding of learning. And lahag means lahag. So I'm saying it with American accent. It's LAHAG, and it means learning for knowledge. And so the scriptural reference is Ecclesiastes 12:12, right? So you want to continue to learning, beware of the constant making of books, but you want to learn for knowledge, right? Ultimately, it's going to come from God. The second biblical term for learning is spoudazo. Okay, that's SPOUDAZO, and that's learning for application. All right, so that's practical learning every day from what you're going through. And I think I quoted the words of Jesus here when he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, anointing me to proclaim the good news to the poor." And what I've learned as a son of God, I'm going to apply on a daily basis, right? So this is when you think about the term, what would Jesus do? What did Jesus do? So you got lahag, you got spoudazo, learning for knowledge, learning for application. Then the last one I reference is learning from God. That's paideia. That's PAIDEIA, learning from God, which is more revelatory. The meditation, the prayer, the studying of the word of the Lord, and having him speak to you. And when you talk about for the love of education, as you said, you're not talking about academics. While that's a part of it, it is about the mindset of ongoing learning that everyone, particularly and I'm going to speak to young men of color because that's who you kind of target, the importance of constant learning. And as I've told my audience all the time, it is not about getting a doctorate degree. Mm-hmm. Right. While I celebrate that and get excited when people say, I'm thinking about it, and I encourage that, it is literally the constant education through reading books, reading articles, listening to talks and lectures and YouTube, going to college or attending workshops, going to conferences. If you still subscribe to magazines, both digitally and physically, whatever you can learn from conversations, it is the constant churning of information to make sure you're becoming the best version of yourself that you can possibly be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, can I just touch on, your book leverage real fast, because I think it's like you said, it's connected. I think it's even more connected than you know. So for me, and a quick message to college students and those looking to go to college. One thing that I always say, you have to know how to do college. Oftentimes there are people who, and I see it every day, who go to college and it's like, I'm going to college to get a job. Wrong, number one. And then two, with classes, I'm looking for the easy A. I want to choose the class that's going to give me the easy A. Or I want to choose the class where I don't need to go, but I can. That's not what you want. That's a waste of your time, a waste of your money, a waste of your existence. What's the point in going there? For me, so college, one, you're paying, and if it's financial aid or scholarship, whatever it is, somebody is paying for you to learn. When you go into a classroom, your professor, your instructor, for me as a professor, like, I have an obligation to teach. You're coming there, you have paid, or someone has paid, the professor has to teach. So to go to a class and to walk away and was like, I really didn't learn anything, but I got an A, that's doing it all wrong. Nobody, like, the A doesn't matter. 10 years from now, if I told somebody my GPA in undergrad, nobody cares. They want to know, what did I learn? What skills did I develop? What dispositions do I have? What attitudes? What mindsets? What am I bringing to the table? Nobody cares about the grade. So it's not about the grade. I always say it's growth over grades. How are you growing? How are you developing? And what I've noticed, and as you were talking about men of color, so my dissertation research, I looked at high achieving Black males. And one of the main things that came out of my research, as far as that made the difference for these young men, one, in matriculation and the success, and some of these guys with 3.9s when they graduated. What made the difference was this thing we call high impact practices, right? And these high impact practices are things, and I'm gonna keep the big one for last, but through leverage. Research, undergraduate research, or mentored research, there's service learning, where it goes beyond just this idea of giving or service or doing certain things, but there's a learning that happens around it, a reflection, there's a build up, so on and so forth. There's capstone projects, there's study abroad and global learning initiatives, and something that I learned too. You can have global learning right where you are. Like, you don't have to go abroad to learn globally. But that's a story for another day. And the other main piece, man, internships. Somebody talked about internships in a book and talked about the leverage that offered somebody, right? And that's the difference. When you go to college, and those who are in college now, you have to engage in these experiences. You have to maximize the college experience. Just going to class and going to hang out and socializing, that's all great, but that's not going to make the difference once you leave. You have to find a way to get that leverage, which Will talks about in Will's book. All those internships and all those great experiences that you were able to leverage and maximize and now able to monetize, that made the difference, man. That really, truly makes the difference. And again, without yelling or going off too much, really, really, you got to know how to do college. You got to know how to leverage the opportunities. And then a question, and last thing, a question somebody asked was like, so what is the greatest resource on this campus? What is the greatest resource in college? And I said, the people around you. The people around you are the greatest resource. It's like I'm engaging with Will. This is what, over 10 years after we originally met. We're not. I'm not, worried about my GPA. We're not talking about that. Talking about, somebody who's doing great work that we're able to connect and develop and sustain a relationship to now that we can even connect our purposes to even help more people. Right? The people around you are the biggest resource at any institution, at any business, any place you are. Look to your left, look to your right. Those are your biggest resources.
I co-sign and agree with all of that. You and I and another gentleman are going to do a podcast about getting a doctorate degree as men of color.
Much to talk about.
It is so much to talk about, but I need to address, what you were saying about how to do college, because I think that we've been conditioned to measure ourselves, and back to what you started off saying, in comparison to other people, based upon a grading system. And the grading system makes you feel good about yourself or your work, and offers an opportunity for you to look down upon somebody who doesn't get the
Yeah,
same
yeah,
grade
yeah,
as you.
yeah, yeah.
But what I've learned, and I've heard this over my years, but it really sunk in when we it was sometime during the doctoral process, and it may have been towards the end. We were encouraged to start businesses with our peers, right? The network. But what we realized and what was said to us is just because you have a DR in front of your name or a PhD behind your name, right, does not guarantee that money, opportunity, or doors will follow.
And preach,
You
preach, preach.
so your 4.0, your 3.9, and your dictorians and all this other stuff, right? It doesn't open up doors that you think it does. But we're conditioned as kids and high schoolers to believe that. And don't get me wrong, for those of you watching, for those of you raising your kids, for any young person who is achieving well in school, don't get me wrong, that matters, because I would want you to get the best grade you can get. However, it does not equate to real world A's.
Yes.
Right? A real world A is I got a job and I feel fulfilled. The A plus is, I'm getting paid a reasonable wage. A plus is I'm generating multiple streams of income from a book, from teaching, which is both of what we do, from administration, which is both of what we do, and from other things that we're doing. That's an A in life. Right? My 3.9 or less than that in high school or college doesn't translate to that, man.
Yeah.
So, I want, and this podcast is dedicated to emerging leaders to teach them how to get an A out of their leadership on a daily basis. This book, Leverage, this book, For the Love of Education, it's practical content about how to win, how to maneuver when you have barriers that are facing you. So this is probably the perfect segue. We have gone off the rails. Like the whole interview questions are just not going to happen.
This is important stuff, though, man.
It is important stuff. I totally agree with that. So let me just quickly read for everybody the 7 proven strategies to love thyself. I'm reading from page 67. Number 1, Omar says 7 proven strategies to love thyself. Number 1 is faith in oneself. Be David. There's a whole lot there. Number 2, have no fear. Number 3, accept and embrace your difference. Number 4, it's not the critic who counts. I did a podcast recently about that. Let's see. Number 5, so what? I say that all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 6, daily reflection. Believe in that. And number 7, daily self-talk and micro affirmations. We got 11 minutes and 30 seconds left. Which one of these seven do you want to just dig into?
Oh, man. Woo, you're going to force me to choose. I think I'll go with I'll go with how this started, and then I think I'll go with so what.
So what you said, you going with 2 of them or 1?
Oh, I'm gonna go with how that whole chapter started.
Okay, and then so what?
And then so what?
All right.
So what happened will, and I don't even know how I got onto this, but I started, incorporating into my talks and speeches this question of asking people to name 3 things that they love about themselves. And I noticed how much of a challenge this was. And these things, I said, they non-physical. You can't say, oh, my eyes, and, I love my ear, none of that stuff. Like something truly about you. What do you love about yourself? Man, and will people struggle? I had people say, do I really got to do 3? Or, well, can you give me some examples? Like, no, it's about you. It's about you, man. Like, what do you love about you? And it really shook me up quite a bit. And I remember I did it one time. I did a talk. And, people struggle so much. Will, I said, all right, we'll stop. Let's just stop. Okay, who is somebody that we all can agree that we know, right? They said, Oprah. And I was like, okay, well, can you name 3 things you love about Oprah? And I mean, Will, they started yelling out and throwing stuff. Oh, Oprah this, and I love this, and love that, and love that. I said, all right, great, fantastic, fantastic. Keep that energy, keep that energy. How many of you know Oprah? Nobody raised their hand. I said, okay, here we are. I said, look, the person you spend 24 hours a day with, the person you know inside and out, you can't name 3 things that you love about that person. But somebody that you've never met in your life, you can go on and on and on about these different things you love about this person. I said, something's wrong here. So that kind of sparked me to say, I need to help people kind of pull out these things about themselves, because we all have greatness within us. That's, we both know that. But sometimes, it may be difficult for us to recognize that and truly appreciate who we are in our own greatness. So wrote this chapter because of that. And I'll say, so what? So what is significant to me because it was something that I struggled with, coming from poverty, coming from a single parent household, coming from, just a lot of circumstance that could have derailed me at certain times, offered, certain challenges and barriers for me. I remember a mentor of mine, Mr. Hezekiah Griggs, said, I remember one day I was literally kind of just whining, like, I can't do this or I can't do that because I didn't have this and nobody taught me this and nobody did this. And he said, Omar, so what? So what? Like, so what? Like, you grew up in a single parent household. So what? You grew up poor. So what? Like, you don't have this. So what? You don't have the Mercedes. So what? You don't have the Benz. So what? Now, what are you going to do? Like, you have everything you need right now to do what you need to do to make the difference in your life, right? What are you going to do with it? We don't want to hear, like, everybody is going through something. I don't care how much money you got. I don't care how famous you are, what's going on. Everybody is going through something. That's life. Now, what are you going to do, right? We can't wallow in the problems. We can't wallow and, sigh and cry about all these challenges and issues. What are you going to do now? How are you going to maximize your situation now? How are you going to utilize leverage, right, to do what you need to do? So what? And that is significant for me because we all got issues. We all got challenges. We all got problems. Every day presents new problems. And we have to get over them and we overcome. And we're built to be overcomers and achievers. So I think this idea, if I could pick out one thing and say, hey, remember this and go with this, so what? When you get into that space and your mind starts to talking to you and saying, oh, well, you ain't got this. Remind yourself, so what? I do have this. Remind yourself what you do have. Remind yourself of the positive things. Remind yourself of the resources and the people that are in your life to help you and guide you and support you. Just so what? Forget the excuses. So what?
So you say, and so what? You say 2 things that stood out for me. You said first, one of the worst things you could do is go through life being against yourself. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing you mentioned is remember everybody's in a place of becoming or arriving. And for me, I think admitting to yourself that giving yourself permission to transition into the person you're trying to become is one of the most important things you could do for yourself. And this is a part of the so what movement you're trying to speak to. Because everybody has barriers. Your skin color may be a barrier. Your gender may be a barrier. Where you grew up may be a barrier. Your economic situation or the history of your economic situation may be a barrier. There is a so what. Now, you talk about the biblical character David in the 7 principles of loving thyself. Let me go biblical for a moment. And this is found in the Leverage book too. One of the Bible is filled with a bunch of characters who had a lot of moments where they could have given up and given in. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what? I was going to use the Leverage example. But I'll use David. And I preached this earlier this year. One of the things that stood out to me about David, and everybody, highlights the fight between Goliath and David. Goliath is huge. David is little. And if you know the story, the king tried to give David some armor. But what I found interesting is not that exchange with the king. That exchange is subservient to what I'm about to share. The exchange that stood out for me, and I believe is the crux of the story, is when he was told by his dad to bring bread and water to his brothers who were on the front line of the war. right? And everybody was all shook. Again, an old school term, don't judge me. Everybody was shook, which means scared. And they were just saying, look, man, this is giant. You know, we don't know what to do. And he's like, wait a minute, who's this uncircumcised Philistine? This little boy, what had the audacity of hope. See what I did there?
Yeah.
He had the audacity of hope.
Yeah.
And the audacity to be strong, even though this was not his fight. But there was a reason why. And peep this, Omar. He went to several people, his brothers and other peoples in the camp, to ask, what's going on? Why are y'all so scared of this uncircumcised Philistine? The reason he said this was because, one, he believed in God, and there was no greater people than the people of God, right? So anybody else that stood up against us really is standing up against our God. But here's the second thing about loving thyself, right? Everybody dismissed his role as a shepherd boy. Even when he was to get anointed, his daddy didn't even consider him a possibility because he was minding the sheep. But what was missed by everyone is that he told King Saul, I have, during my time of interning, when nobody was looking, when nobody was paying attention, I fought lions and bears. Now, if you've done any type of basic research, if you would know that a bear standing on his hind legs is roughly 9 to 10 feet tall.
Yes,
a bear standing, period, is a heavy individual, and much heavier than any human being could be.
Yes, sir.
Same thing with the lion, right? Tall, long, beings, heavy, stronger than David. And he said, I killed and slain both of them, which indicates to me he got practice slinging his slingshot from a distance and cutting off heads.
Yep.
While he was an intern. And I hope y'all putting this piece of the puzzle together. So when he discovered Goliath, the uncircumcised Philistine, who could not weigh more than a bear or a lion, who could not be stronger than a bear or a lion, who could not be faster than a bear or a lion, he said to himself, I got this. I don't need your armor. I don't need your support. I don't need your words of affirmation. I don't need your sword. I don't need you to get my back. I don't need you to be in my corner, be my cheerleader. I got this. Give me 5 smooth stones. I'll be right back. And then the rest of the story is history. He slings the first shot, hits him in the head, cuts his head off, and the story's over, right? For me, when you say so what, and if you are one of those people who allows yourself to demean your humble beginnings, you allow yourself to demean your internships, your volunteerism, your small business with no sales, no teaching opportunities. I'm too black, I'm too hood, I'm too this, I'm too that, or I'm a woman, or whatever the case may be. When you demean what you consider a deficiency, you're losing out on what makes you uniquely you and what makes you strong when Goliath stands up and says, who wants to fight?
You were preaching. I was.
Oh, I'm done.
I was about to throw some more. I said, oh, man, yes, sir.
But yeah, man, is there anything else you want to share as a follow-up to what I shared in terms of the story of David and the so what principle?
No, I think, man, that was awesome. And I'm glad you pulled out the points that I think are significant for many people to see. One, the practice piece, so to speak. Like you said, nobody saw when you were doing those internships. Nobody saw when he was, quote unquote, practicing and doing these different things. And I think that is something that's oftentimes missed, especially in today's world. And then the meaningful practice, and even Malcolm Gladwell's book, where he talks about it, like that the idea of the 10,000 hours. It's not just, he wasn't practicing just, slinging and, doing whatever just on his own free time. No, we talk about lions and bears, man. We talk about some serious stuff. And it wasn't like you were at home just, jotting down some notes. No, you were in some significant, Fortune 500 businesses doing some real work. I think that one, the idea of practice and the idea of preparation and the idea of putting yourself in the situation you want to be in. And we never know what's coming. Like, we're developing these skills and we don't know what's coming. He didn't know he was going to end up fighting Goliath. He was just doing his thing. He didn't know that. So I love that piece, man. I love that, and I think that is transferable to any experience, and anybody I think can learn from that experience. This idea of just meaningful practice and developing of skills that you never know when you may need them.
So true. Despise not the humble beginnings that you start with.
Mm.
Um, how can people find you? How can people keep up with you?
Yeah, so a few ways. Of course, on the website, omarsimpson.com, omarsimpsonfoundation.org. Also on social media on Instagram, I'm Omar_Simpson. A lot of great content. And, I'm even been pushed recently or challenged recently to even post a little bit more often. So I'll be offering some more content out there on IG and then on Facebook, Dr. Omar Simpson fan page. It's Dr. Omar Simpson on Facebook. Can find me there. And then email. I'm definitely open to all emails. I love to engage. I love to interact. I want to help. If anybody has questions about anything that I said or anything in my book or anything, I love to hear it, or comments. Love to hear it. Love to engage. You can email me, Simpson. And I think it's here on the screen, but SIMPSON dot Omar, OMAR @gmail.com. Send me an email. Definitely send me an email, questions, concerns, if there's any way that I can help or support anybody's movement or things that is going on relative to education, relative to helping people. Let me know. Would love to.
Awesome. And you can follow me at Leadership Conversations on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. And subscribe to this show utilizing your favorite podcast platform. This is Dr. William Clark for Dr. Omar Simpson. This is Leadership Conversations, and we'll see you in the next show.
Thank you, Will.